People have been incorrectly accused of cheating. What was your partner's proof? I was the one doing the accusing for what seemed like a very good reason. A good friend of mine informed me that my wife was having an affair with a guy from her work. His proof is that my wife, who was his wife's best friend, had told her in confidence that she was seeing this guy at work. I then did something I swore I'd never do and took a look at her phone messages, where I saw a whole bunch of messages between her and another friend from her work discussing the entire thing. I confronted her and she explained how it was actually a test for the first friend as she suspected that the friend in question was gossiping about her to my wife's ex-husband and father of her child. She just neglected to tell me about her genius plan she cooked up with her friend. Turns out her friend was gossiping about her. The problem being that now this fake secret actually made its way around town. I had a conversation with the alleged affair guy and told him he better tell his wife outright that this had happened. The stupid game nearly cost 2 marriages, mine and the other guy's, because of rumors. And ended the friendship, as now my wife and the secret teller were now enemies. It means that I now didn't get to hang out with the husband. It caused me to look at my wife in a totally different light, as she didn't think that there was anything wrong with the plan and how it was all her, now ex-friend's fault in the first place for telling her husband. We're no longer together. Her plan sounds like a bad sitcom plot. Story 2. I got accused of some uncomfortable feelings from my then girlfriend and now wife. She had just gone out of a relationship where the previous dude had been engaged to 2 women at once and decided that when he was ready to move, he was taking the other one and not my wife. It seriously messed up her mental state a bit. To be clear, she let me know from the outset that she had trust issues because of this. I could back out if that's too much. I didn't, of course. Anyway, she came over one day and before I got a call from my mom, which ended up being a longer call than I wanted, she flips out because it was 8 p.m. My mom lives in a different time zone and who talks to their mom that late? She looked at my phone, which I happily provided, and looked at the number. Because my mom uses landlines, it was easy to find the number. She calmed down. Had a couple other small incidents, but the moment that she found out I enjoyed playing Dungeons & Dragons and board games seemed to the moment the accusations ended. Pop culture, video games, anime, and otherwise any other kinds of nerds generally do not have time to cheat. That would otherwise go into the other activities they enjoy. Also, we're happy that at least one person likes to sleep with us, and we're not messing that up. To be fair, she's not wrong. Why would we give up on that one person who tolerated us? Story 3. Okay, this one is crazy. So in college, I had this girlfriend that I really liked. It was something I didn't mind settling down with. I was kinda in love. Now I've always worked at restaurants and bars, so meeting people to be with wasn't ever hard. And if you worked in the industry, you know that having casual intimacy with some of your coworkers is really common. My girlfriend knew about this, and she knew that once we became exclusive, I stopped doing this. 1 month life got in the way and we stopped having intimacy for like 2 weeks, and with my high libido, I was stressed and angry. With this, a perfect storm started to brew. Once me and her were finally able to meet and have intimacy, my phone got a message about how one of my recent partners was tested for STDs and came back positive, and that I should get tested. Now at that point, I'd been dating this girl for like almost a year, and when she read that message, she freaked out and started screaming at me. She broke up with me on the spot and didn't give me a chance to explain. 3 months later, I started catching up with my high school sweetheart and I was telling her about the story, and she laughs and said, "Oh, sorry, I entered your name and phone number in a site that tells partners about potential STDs in an anonymous way." At that point, my ex-girlfriend had moved on and had another boyfriend, so it was too late for me to get her back. And I stopped talking to my high school sweetheart because of that. Jeez, sounds like the sweetheart was still sweet on him and trying to free him up for herself. Story 4. My ex was a super jealous Marine. His best friend came out to visit and we very much hit it off. He was really smart and a reader and could talk about deep social and philosophical issues, which is totally my jam. Well, my ex would take these midday 4-hour naps and take it as per usual. His friend and I hung out and talked while he slept. Mind you, I was 9 months pregnant at this time. When he woke up, he was convinced that we had been intimate. It took no evidence whatsoever, just that he had gone to sleep and woke up and we must have taken advantage of the situation. Well, as things would turn out, his friend and I laughed it off, because he must have been joking. Nope. For the entirety of our marriage, he was convinced his friend and I were having this steamy love affair. It was comical. He tried to find evidence in everything. We are thankfully divorced now, and his friend is one of my very best friends. Still haven't slept with him. Amazing how women and men can be friends without having intimacy. It's incredibly juvenile to think otherwise. It's a reflection of your own intentions in the world. Story 5. My ex-wife accused me of cheating all the time. The thing is, I never did and I never wanted to. Here's a story about how bad it was. I was at work and my wife called. She told me that someone who knew me told someone who knew my wife that on the previous Wednesday, I was seen having lunch with a beautiful young woman. I allegedly fawned all over this woman, and when we left, I kissed her and told her I loved her. Then we got in separate cars and drove away. My wife was enraged. I was dumbfounded. There was no way I did this, but how do I prove something that never happened? I was miserable the rest of the day. Then, just before leaving work, I realized a way to prove my innocence. I called my wife. This is what I told her. I have to come clean. I did in fact have lunch with a beautiful woman last Wednesday. I can't deny it any longer. I kissed her and I told her I love her. I admit that I've been having intimacy with her. Now, before you get more emotional than you already are, I need to ask you a question. What did you do for lunch last Wednesday? You see, I got in trouble with my wife for having an affair with my wife. She had met me for lunch. Let me tell you, her reaction was priceless. It was one of those rare times in our marriage where, for about 2 weeks, I was treated like a god. How did someone forget they were with someone and believe that person was with someone else? Story 6. On the other hand, I've been incorrectly accused of being the other woman. The most recent one was an ex-coworker and I became pretty good work buddies. We're video game nerds, so I would text him about video game stuff after work hours. His wife, who I found out was a super jealous type, accused him of cheating on her with me. She came to the office one day to bring him lunch just to meet me. She didn't say anything to my face and was nice, but it was a weird interaction. The next day, he told me they fought about me sleeping with him. None of it was true. They fought so much about me that I stopped texting him after work. During work, I only texted him about work stuff. It got to the point where she didn't care about the context, just that I was texting him. I tried to be friends with her to help ease her suspicions. Didn't help. I didn't do anything wrong. He didn't do anything wrong. She's just crazy and has major trust issues. Apparently, she's always been this way, so he doesn't have many friends. He wanted to divorce her, but stayed for the children. So yeah, her proof was that I texted him about video games we both play, so I must be sleeping with him, because why else would I be texting about the new video game coming out if I wasn't having intimacy with him? Story 7. So can I comment as the one who has done the incorrect accusation? Though I never actually accuse him, I believe to my core my partner would never cheat on me. I just want to preface this by saying I have some relationship trauma from being cheated on in the past. And I also have borderline personality disorder, so sometimes I can get inadvertently triggered by my partner's actions, and then spiral into a BPD episode. It's a nightmare. I think because I've been in therapy for over a year, and at times it was very intensive, 3 times a week, I've got a pretty good handle on my BPD. I overcommunicate with my partner to work through my emotions and never flat out accuse him. Just a few things that have triggered me. He angled his phone away from me. The girl at a store we frequent is pretty, so I worked up this incredibly delusional scenario where he had a crush on her and went to the store solely because he has a crush on her. This was a very specific BPD episode, which I was able to work through on my own and only talked to him about it after the fact when I had calmed down. As far as my body or mind was concerned though, it was real. My pressure went up, my heart started pounding, I got hot, my stomach dropped, and I was trembling with fear from this ridiculously delusional scenario. After I had calmed down and we were talking about it, we both found it a bit amusing. Just a tiny bit though. Lol. I saw a couple heart emojis at a glance in an SMS thread. He closes his phone the moment I sit on the couch beside him. Every single time, as embarrassing and humiliating and vulnerable as it is, I simply tell him how I'm feeling. I'm feeling really triggered because of that. I don't actually think you're cheating, but it's like the BPD part of my brain is trying to convince me you're cheating. I'm really sorry. I know it's the irrational fight or flight BPD part of my brain kicking in and trying to convince me of my amazing partner of doing horrible things. It's emotionally and mentally exhausting, and I wish I could just wake up tomorrow with a normal brain. I'm commenting in the hopes that if someone else who experiences or feels what I do and is incorrectly accusing their partner can maybe see there are other ways to go about it. It's okay to have insecurity. It's okay to have trauma. You can work through it in a healthy and constructive way. The feelings itself aren't the problem. The way we incorrectly handle them is the problem. But this doesn't apply to the cheating schmucks projecting the problems onto their partner. Story 8. Finally, I have a story. But it wasn't my partner. It was my friend's partner. I had been friends with a guy named Mike, fake name, for a couple of years before he met his girlfriend. Let's call her Sally. Sally had a lot of jealousy issues and really didn't like Mike hanging out with a female friend. Even if I was with my husband or she was with him, Mike was really infatuated with her and didn't create any boundaries. Mike wanted to refresh his apartment and buy some furniture. He invited me along as I have a discount card he can use to get a sweet deal. We go to the retail store, pick up the furniture. He drops me off and goes along his merry way. Sally accused him of cheating with me that night. Another occasion a few weeks later, I invited Mike to a work event. The company held a snowboarding day for employees plus guests. Mike and I usually hit the slopes a few times each winter, so naturally I asked him to be my guest. We drive up together, spend the day in the slopes, have a beer, then he drives me home. Later that night, Sally blew up at him, saying she isn't comfortable with him being alone with me. A few weeks later, Mike and I met up to attend a sports event. At this time, my husband was gone for a few months on a work trip, so I reached out to Mike as I knew he would enjoy the free tickets I held to this event. We attend the sports game, say our goodbyes, and head our separate ways. That evening, Sally sat Mike down with an ultimatum. She said there's evidence she found of Mike cheating on her with me, and me cheating on my husband with him. Keep in mind, my husband and Mike are best friends, who talk constantly. Mike asked her what her evidence was. She pointed to texts. The texts of me asking if he would like to, number 1, buy furniture on my discount, number 2, attend a free snowboarding day, and number 3, attend a free sports game. She said by hanging out and texting, he's obviously cheating on her. She told him it's either her or me. He chose her. Our friendship stopped existing after that, and even though he finally threw her to the curb, our relationship has never recovered. I'm still confused how someone can be so jealous over their partner hanging with the opposite gender. Story 9. My ex-wife's sister had convinced her that I was sleeping with a friend because I would be seen walking my friend from a shared class to the computer club meetings every Wednesday. She then convinced my ex-wife that the only way to get even would be to cheat on me. She ended up getting with a few guys and had been cheating for a fair bit of time. Once my wife decided to leave me, I was still unaware of the cheating. The sister was consoling me and suggesting that I should move on. I told her that I was going to wait for my ex-wife to get over whatever was bothering her because she had wanted to leave in the past but kept coming back after some time. Yes, I was an idiot. I'd still pay the bills and clean up every now and again when my ex took her boy out or to see the family. After a couple months or so of these talks, her sister then told me she had been cheating and that it's been going on for a while. I was super angry and called my ex to confirm. I was really shaken up because we were trying to make it work for our boy. Nonetheless, my ex then broke the news that her sister was telling her that I'd been cheating and encouraged her to get back at me. Flash forward a few more months from that fallout, and her sister started to reach out and was coming over to hang out. Started with that statement of, we're still family, and progressed into, you deserve better, and so on. We started sleeping with one another, and honestly, back then it was just meant to be revenge on my ex-wife, but it turned into a pretty regrettable experience. One that served to complicate the dynamic between me and my ex when trying to be respectful and courteous to one another for the sake of our boy. It's been years now, and we found our stride. Story 10. Oh, I have a good one for this. When I was in college, I had a boyfriend from back home that lived about an hour away. He wasn't super happy with me going to college. He was excessively controlling and manipulative, and was always suspicious of who I was hanging out or studying with, but I constantly invited him down to the campus and he never wanted to come. This resulted in me spending every weekend driving an hour north to stay with him. On Halloween weekend, he finally agreed to come down to see me. I think it was because my friends wanted to go to this party and I was invited, but he didn't want me to go, so he figured he'd come distract me for the night. I was staying at a friend's house as a temporary living situation, and the entrance to her duplex is behind the front of the house, so it's very hard to see. I told my boyfriend to call me when he was close to the address so I could walk out to the street to direct him down the driveway. He texted me to say he was approaching, so I waited for the call but never got one. Finally, I went outside. I had terrible cell service in this area, so as soon as I went outside, I saw 5 missed calls from him and a couple angry voicemails because he couldn't find the house I was staying in. I walked out to the street and called him back immediately. He started going off on me that he had heard everything I said and couldn't believe I would do this. Obviously, I was extremely confused. I see his car headlights turn about a block down from where I'm standing, so I'm waving my arms to get his attention while asking on the phone what he's talking about. Turns out that the house he had parked in front of was having some sort of small gathering in their backyard behind a privacy fence. He swore he could hear my voice back there, telling some guy how I hated being with my boyfriend but can't find a good way to dump him, and that he heard people addressing me by name. I was stunned. I tried to reason how that made no sense as he had literally watched me walk out of the house up the block and up to the sidewalk to get his attention. I asked how I possibly could have been at that house down the street, then at this one 30 seconds later. He claimed I had seen his calls, hopped over the fence on the other side, and ran up the street to call him back. I didn't know what to say as the claim was so ridiculous and physically impossible. Anyways, we spent the entire night there arguing and he was screaming at me so loud until I broke down and cried so hard. When I look back in that relationship, I know I should have ended it right then and there, but unfortunately we stayed together for about 6 more months. Story 11. This is a little convoluted, but my job as an industrial electrician required to carry a pager. I would get a page and often needed to find a payphone in a very rural Pacific Northwest USA. At the same time, many places that had payphones were switching from major carriers like GTE or Verizon or Bell to off-brand suppliers that would kick back more money for allowing the pay kiosk in the property. The problem was, the off-brand didn't have their own operator services, and such calls were routed to major cities 150 miles away. And this is how the call posted in the billing. If I was in Washington State, it would go 150 miles away to Spokane. If I was south, it might go to Portland. Both my ex and my employer got together and decided I had women stashed away in the cities. I would be down in the compressor room of an Apple processor up to my ears in noise, oil, and leaky ammonia, and they decided I was off doing the horizontal bebop. They actually did an intervention-type confrontation with me. I was A, stunned, B, unable to explain why the billing showed the call in a different place. A friend of mine with GTE at the time explained it to me and said there's a little disclaimer in these off-service phone booths, saying service may show different billing codes. Explaining this is like a blacksmith at the turn-off of the 1900s trying to understand automobile impact. You no longer have pagers, very few phone booths, or operators as such, but it is the equivalent of somebody combing through your cell phone looking for incriminating evidence. I did use this as a springboard to a far better work career and relationship. Story 12. My ex always accused me of cheating whenever my bus ran a little late. I'm coming home from a 10-hour shift, which does not include the 1-hour travel to and from, so I was away for 12 hours. To him, accusing me and crying, all because I was 5 to 10 minutes late and didn't text to let him know. He also would break down if I didn't say I love you 30 times a day. I broke up with him after his Johnson turned big, angry, and purple, and the first thing he said to me when I got to the hospital was, "I didn't cheat." And just to let you guys know, I tested myself after and didn't have an STD. We hadn't been sleeping together much at that point due to the fact I was in pain from my now diagnosed autoimmune disease, to which he didn't believe I was ill. And when I wasn't in pain, he was begging and crying for intimacy, which was an instant turn-off. To top it off, in the breakup novel he wrote to me, he called me Jay, which my name doesn't start with, but his best friend, who was a street worker, started with a J. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 13. It was a very brief relationship with little substance, but the story still makes me laugh. On Halloween night, I sent my, at the time, boyfriend a Snapchat of me and my openly non-straight friend. We had met on multiple occasions. He immediately got all sulky and quiet, then proceeded to essentially ghost me. I tried texting him over the next week, trying to understand what happened, but quickly realized it was not worth trying to salvage the relationship. I finally ended up getting him on the phone about a week later to chat. The call was civil, but definitely awkward. After a few minutes of small talk, I asked, "So what happened? Why did you go ghost?" All he said was, "Well, you cheated on me. You literally sent me a picture of it." I couldn't help but laugh. I explained to him that it was my non-straight friend, but he adamantly refused that it was him and that it was a random guy. I even texted my friend and asked if he remembered me taking a selfie with him at the party, and he said yes. I screenshotted the convo and sent it to my ex. Only then did he believe me. The call wrapped up and we parted ways. I continued to text my non-straight friend about the call with my ex, and he then told me that he had seen my ex that day after the Halloween party at another party, and my ex had been with a random girl there. So he falsely assumed I cheated on him, then immediately went on to cheat on me out of retaliation. Definitely dodged in that one. Story 14. I got a new job, and as I changed from part-time to full-time, my income increased drastically. Had, at the time, more than 15 years of experience in my field, so the pay was justified. The rise was his proof, because obviously no one would pay an assistant to the director an adequate sum if there was not any catch involved. I had to work overtime when my colleague fell ill for months and working longer than usual. Though he knew about the situation, was his proof. I refused to break up all my friendships to spend my time with only him, because if I was not messing with other people, I would not mind excluding them from my life. I had a 6-hour choir rehearsal the weekend before a concert. He knew in advance, even sent him pics of all the cakes that were brought during the break. We would always rehearse for some hours, eat together, and continue singing afterwards. But as I could not answer his messages after the break, because obviously we all would mute our phones, the only plausible explanation was that I was suddenly somewhere else with someone else and cheating. That guy really was a piece of work. There was nothing that he did not regard as cheating. Going grocery shopping without the kids? Cheating. Having one-on-one vocal training with a choir leader? 60s, female? Cheating. Meeting friends? Cheating. Being invited to a birthday party? Cheating! Visiting a wedding with my kids? Cheating. Found out when I finally broke up with him that he was projecting all the time. He even planned to visit the same festival with a side piece and me at the same time. I'm still baffled how he would have tried to avoid her and me actually not noticing anything. Had an interesting conversation with her when I found out that we're friends now. That angered him off the most. Story 15. Nothing. Context, I just had a male best friend that wasn't hiding his attraction to me. I'd never said yes to him, but I never specifically said no either. I should have, but didn't. There wasn't any flirting either. Yes, I know I said he didn't hide his attraction, but it wasn't in the context of flirting. This dude wasn't particularly in my life in the 5 years I was with my ex. A hello here and there, never more. Besides, I didn't sleep with him before meeting my now ex. During the relationship, nor did it happen afterwards either. I'm not interested in him. The accusation. I was in the area where my now ex-best friend and I attended elementary school. My mom had acquired a lot that she was preparing for construction. It's literally in a mound, so there are tons of trees alongside the trail or road that leads to where the house is now sitting. They had to be removed for electricity provider to install posts and run electric cables. She'd asked for my help with that, so I went. According to my ex, I was actually messing with my best friend. That's solely based on projection. My ex had cheated on every single one of the girlfriends he has had. He still couldn't keep his Johnson in his pants while with me. He was the cheater, not me. But because he knew best friend was attracted to me, and since I'd never explicitly turned the dude down or since he was still a friend of mine, I was necessarily cheating on him. I understand the concern that I never specifically said no, but that's the only proof, if we can call that proof, of my so-called cheating. I never cheated on him. I never cheated on anyone. I don't plan to, and it's not something that I would be comfortable with doing anyway. Story 16. My coworker sent a text to me after we had a get-together with our kids and fellow coworkers, saying I had left the monster sock at her house. Ex assumed this was intimacy slang. It was my kid's sock with a cartoon monster in the ankle. Ex wasn't hearing it. Same coworker. We were out of town for work. This one I do shoulder some blame for what came of it, because I hid the fact that my coworker and I would even be in the same area together, because by this point, I was over being accused of being a cheater even though I hadn't done anything wrong. Looking back, we were at a point where our marriage was already over, and lying or admitting to a spouse is a clear sign it's not going to work. Anyways, we all had dinner at a restaurant with about 20 to 25 of us. Someone took a picture and I was sitting next to the same coworker I was previously accused of cheating with. We were in the same division and each division mostly sat next to each other. Later that night, the same girl had a mental breakdown at the bar we all went to, crying about missing her kids and custody issues she was dealing with. She also drank quite a bit too much. Another coworker and I grabbed an Uber and took her back to sleep it off. She got carsick. I threw my jacket, which she immediately retched into. Had to literally fireman carry this woman back and drop her off with other female coworkers to make sure she got to sleep and didn't have any issues. Ex again didn't want to hear it. The picture alone was the obvious proof she needed to believe I had cheated again. Ex caused such a mess for me at my job that I ended up turning down over $100,000 in bonuses to stay longer, because her actions involved calling all of my superiors to tell them that I was having an affair with said coworker and had proof. She had essentially railroaded my career and stood into the garbage, as my superiors didn't want the drama. She also gave me the ultimatum: stay at the job and divorce, in which she would seek full custody and move with the children, or leave the job and do what's right for my family. My job wasn't very family-friendly, so I left the job 3 months later and moved with her back across the country to try and make things work for my kids' sake. We divorced a year and a half later. She's still crazy. Story 17. We were renting our van out on Turo for a while. One of the last trips, months ago, a customer had left some foundation behind, so I tossed it in one of my other cars while I waited for a response to know if the customer wanted it back. I also told my wife, hey, if you're in the other car and you see a foundation, don't worry, it's the woman who rented the van. Customer said no, she didn't want it and forgot about it for months. Last month, she went to take her daughter to school and the van battery went out. So she started cleaning out our other car with the foundation, and she found it. She also forgot all about the part where I told her who it was months before. So the one time ever I have my company owner, 2 regional managers, my manager, and a sister property manager in one room, and my wife calls up my phone with 3 calls since I was ignoring them, since I was in the first meeting ever with my company ownership. Then she texts me a pic and says, what in the world is this? After my phone alarms for those 2 messages, the owner says, it's okay, we can wait. So I took out my phone and started laughing harder than I'd ever laughed before. All the leadership looked at me like I'm crazy, so I explained and they all laughed too. I went to the Turo app and found months-old messages where I asked the woman if she wanted it back, with brand name and everything. Sent it to my wife and she said, "Oh yeah, I forgot." It's hilarious to me because my wife is not a jealous woman. Story 18. I had to take a day off from work and drive across the state for some medical tests that my insurance would only cover in a very specific location. It took about 4 hours to drive there and a couple hours for the test to be done. And afterwards, I got food with an old female friend, M, that had moved there. Right after eating, I did the 4-hour drive back home. Getting ready for bed that night, my girlfriend says, "Hey, what are those in your back?" I look in the mirror and on both shoulder blades, the skin is red and lightly brushed. Girlfriend starts screaming at me as to why I have hickeys on my shoulder blades. I'm much more confused than her, and I can only say maybe while I was driving, I was seated wrong, causing wear and tear again at those locations, or that maybe during the testing, pressure was placed on them. Not great solutions, I know. I was trying to be as reasonable as possible. She starts screaming at me to admit I cheated on her with said friend M. I'm honest with her still that I'm unsure where they came from. But point out I don't think kissing on people's shoulder blades to the point of hickeys is a thing. The conversation devolves from there, with me trying to point out how if I was in this hypothetical frantic love rush scenario, where hickeys are being doled out, I should have them in more places than my shoulder blades, and her just screaming at me to admit it. Relationship lasted another week after I realized she was cheating on me when she forgot to turn her Find My Friends off. Story 19. I used to have my location shared on Snapchat with my friends. I work nights as a first responder, so I go to bed around 8 a.m. and I knock out hard after a shift. Did my usual routine. Went home, showered, texted my girl for a little, then went to bed. Important to note, my girl lives about 5 minutes away from me in the same city. I guess while I was driving home from work, Snapchat GPS connected to a cell tower nearby and placed my location at an address about 1 mile away. My girlfriend was looking at Snap Maps and saw my Bitmoji character placed at a different address. When I said I was going to bed, I'll give her credit, this does look pretty bad. She FaceTimed me at 4 p.m. when I usually wake up, which was already weird. Says, "Hey, good morning. So what were you doing at XXX this morning?" Me, clearly confused, asked her what she meant. She told me my location and showed me some houses at this address. I shut that down quickly. Fortunately, I used a Fitbit to track my sleep, which showed I went to sleep when I said that I did, and it showed my location, which was my address. I still bring it up once in a while just to mess with. Story 20. Oh, I have a long list of situations where my ex used to accuse me of cheating. Every week it was something new. I don't think it was projection per se, more so he was very insecure and had a lot of issues. But the time that sticks out to me the most was when we had gone to eat breakfast one day before classes, and I became very sick with some sort of stomach bug, so I had a fever and was vomiting all over the place. I had ordered a fruit parfait, but obviously couldn't eat it, so I took it to go. Left the restaurant and scheduled a doctor's appointment. I couldn't be seen by the doctor for a few hours and didn't want to drive all the way back home. I lived far, so I just parked at the doctor's office and laid on my backseat in agony for those few hours. Meanwhile, my yogurt parfait that the restaurant had put in a cardboard to-go box was melting and spilling a little bit on my front passenger seat. I didn't care about the mess. It was very small at the time because I was, of course, not feeling well, so I was going to deal with it later. Fast forward, I see the doctor, get prescribed some nausea medication, and go home. Mind you, never once checked on me through text or anything the rest of the day. The next day, I feel much better, and after classes, I pick him up so that we can hang out. He's sitting in the front seat and notices the dried specks of yesterday's yogurt on it and immediately starts to act weird and basically get an attitude with me. Side note, he had a really bad car, so we always used mine, meaning I drove us everywhere. So he would always leave his stuff and trash in the passenger side door, so everything in there was from him. He suddenly looks in the passenger side door compartment and grabs a balled up napkin, which was obviously his because no one else sat in that seat, and started inspecting it and the dried yogurt together. He basically accused me of lying about being sick so that I could ditch him and have a fun time with another guy in my car, and that the dried yogurt stains and dirty napkins were proof that I had forgotten to dispose of. I tried explaining to him the situation, that it was the yogurt from our breakfast the day before, and that I had been in bed the entire time after the doctor's visit, but he didn't believe me. I broke up with him shortly after. Story 21. My girl had no evidence, but she was absolutely sure one time, 3 years previous when I was getting lunch with a friend of hers, I must have been with said friend. Despite no evidence of this and the adamant testimony from both of us that we did not in fact hook up, we talked about work and trying to get our careers off the ground. This argument would come up every 6 months or so when she was drunk, and she'd start insisting I must have hooked up with her friend because I was with her for an hour and a half in a busy open-air market where there's lots of places where we could have a clandestine affair. Eventually, I refused to even participate in these conversations as they were not coming from any place grounded in any kind of logic, which only seemed to drive her to further infuriation. So eventually I had it. There were 100 other reasons and I left her. Technically, I let her leave me, which she did every other week or so, and this time I just called her bluff. She was very surprised Pikachu about it, but we were basically just arguing all the time and I'd realized I was letting her isolate me from my friends. Anyway, while she's screaming into the phone about how I'm a monster and never going to do as well as her and blah blah blah, I honestly stopped listening. She starts going off about all the extra relational intimacy she's been having and how much better everyone was than me and I'm a terrible lover, which threw the frequent accusations of infidelity into stark relief. So remember kids, if it looks like projection, it almost always is. For the record, I was 100% monogamous the entire time I was in that dynamic. Amusingly, I'm in a polyamorous dynamic now, and it's easily the healthiest, most communicative, and consent-focused relationship I've ever been in. Story 22. Her friend told her I did. That's all. Her friend decided something I did was suspicious and she relayed I had cheated. It took a long time to shake, but one day my brother-in-law's ex-girlfriend, let's call her Jay, came over to talk about moving into our basement. They got to talking, we were all hammered. She tells my wife, after my wife brought up the cheating thing, that I definitely would never cheat. My wife asks how she can know for sure, and she comes out with a story. She and my bro-in-law had come over years ago and were arguing. She decided to stay the night and he left angry. My wife had to work and went to sleep early, so I grabbed fresh sheets from the basement suite and made the bed for her. I left to get a pillow, and when I came back, she was completely bare on the bed. She said I told her I loved my wife and wouldn't be interested and left. Important note to the story, I was blackout hammered the entire time. When he had left, she and I had taken a bunch of drinks and had a cry about her breaking up with him, blah blah. I don't know why my wife trusted my intoxicated actions and the story of the person we hadn't spent time with in years more than me, but it worked. She started trusting me more after, and the problem hasn't returned. We even had some poly relationships after, so I don't know how to explain her distrust, really. Story 23. I just saw the BuzzFeed article in this and knew I had a peach of a story to tell. My boyfriend of 2 years and I weren't doing well, and I was heading out of town, so I told him he could stay or go while I was gone. At that point, I didn't care. I leave the next morning and drive 3 hours to where my father was having open heart surgery. I was at the hospital the entire time during visiting hours or at the Airbnb close by. The night nurse, while my father was in ICU, gave me his unit cell number to check in on my dad through the night, which I did. After my dad was moved out of the ICU, I drove home because I had to work that night. Now this part is important. It has been snowing, I have arthritis in my knees and hips, and I don't have cruise control in my car. So when I arrived home to find said boyfriend, there I was limping from my right knee and hip hurting after the drive. I proceeded to get dressed and get ready for work and leave for the night. Apparently, my limp and John in my phone was evidence that I had cheated. And to prove that, he stole the drawers I had changed out of from the laundry. Cut to a month later and he gets blackout hammered and cheats on me with the most disgusting human imaginable. We broke up and he decided to send my drawers as well as hair from my brush to some sketchy lab. Then he tells me he didn't cheat. He was taken advantage by this woman while blacked out. Knowing this vile creature is horrid enough to possibly do that, I believe him and take him back. A year later, I'm getting ready for work and the idiot boyfriend is arguing with me, brings up the situation with John again and says he has DNA evidence to prove it. I tossed him out of the house. He later would claim he didn't send the drawers off. He did, but it came back negative for 4 in DNA. It came back positive, but he didn't believe it. It came back inconclusive, etc. He later told everyone I was neglectful of my kids and it was them he missed, not me. All the while stalking me, even going so far as to get a job at my place of employment, forcing me to leave sooner than I'd planned. All of our friends were confused and torn because I was trying to keep cordial at first and polite. By the time I realized I needed to defend myself, it was too late. It sounded false. Later, he showed his true colors to everyone and I really saw who my real friends were. Most of them were friends of mine that became mutual while we dated. A year later, I found out from his former best friend, an old friend of mine as well, that he wasn't taken advantage of. He'd admitted to cheating on me that night of his birthday. He's completely out of my life now, thankfully, and he doesn't even have the friends he tried to steal away with bogus lies. I mean, he accused me of cheating on him with books too. Because I'm a bookworm and always had been, it was cheating. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.